Hello, welcome to Life Rhythms, Tarot, Food, and Spirit. I'm here this Thursday evening in inspiration from just watching Two Spirit do a video response to Katey Flowers' Tarot Obsessed tag. And I'm still getting my feet wet in doing these tags and video responses. And so I watched his and I thought, well, this is one that I would like to take part in and can do relatively simply, although, you know, when one is being asked about their favorite decks and things like this, they're deceptively simple questions, not really so simple. So to be fair, I haven't watched Katey's original video. I wanted to just jump in and be able to get this done this evening before it got too late. And so here we'll go. And I will post the questions and Katey's original link, the link to Katey's original video below once I post this. So the first question to #TarotObsessed is, what was your very first tarot deck? And mine was the Mother Peace deck. I truly am not remembering exactly how it came into my possession. I know I was in my late teens or early 20s, and I, at that point in my life, was really pretty well embedded in the areas of extraordinary learning, if you will, but tarot had not been one of them at that point. But the deck, I'd been around it, but it hadn't spoken to me. And then the Mother Peace deck came in hand, and it was round, it is round, and has very female, matriarchal centric images and themes, and I just took to it like a fish to water. And so that deck has been with me ever since. Not that exact deck, mind you, but I probably have, actually over all these years, this might only be my third version of the deck. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I'm just pulling it out of its bag here. I don't have anything in any particular order. But we've got some discs. She names the Pentacles discs. The Fool. And I love how she, for me, and I think for many women, makes the Hermit so accessible as the Crone. Even when I was a young woman, when this first came into my possession, certainly just coming out of maidenhood. Well, you know, but at the edge of maidenhood into mother, that even that image at that point was accessible to me. Justice. Let's see, wow, I have a lot of discs all together here, and Strength, which is a card that just came up for me in a reading yesterday with this deck. 8 of Wands. So yes, so this deck is my first deck. My current favorite deck, tarot deck. I have two favorites. They're new to me. One came in November and one in October. And I'm just pulling this out first. The Tarot of the Crone. Ellen Lorenzi Prince. And this, I would say, for its directness, its simplicity in the sense of its directness, in a way speaks to me on a similar wavelength as the mother piece. I hope no one's going like, what the hell is she talking about? But for me, for my nervous system, these cards, I have a similar response. I feel it's very matriarchal centric, and I love, and for where I am in my life right now, all these shrouded images, and how evocative, the energy behind them. Like it's like these shrouded images, and many of them just in different kind of configurations, different colors. Yet the Fool, I completely receive, what is happening with those cards. And so this is a deck that is I'm very connected to right now, as well as the deck that came in October, and I used quite a bit for the Shadow Work October Challenge, which was my first IG challenge that I've taken part in, and that was wonderful, a wonderful challenge. I was very inspired by that challenge, and so that the deck I used for that is the Marielle, and in so many ways couldn't be more different than the Tarot of the Crone. The lush, rich, almost over full, and I say that in the best of ways for me, imagery, but it's just you could feast on one of these cards. You could feast on one of these cards for quite some time, and then this image of the Empress, which I'm going to be offering tomorrow to a client that I'm going to be working with as an image for her to be working with some of the work I do with clients. So those are my two current favorite decks. And then I would also have to say, I don't have the collection of decks that many of you have, and because in a way I had the mother piece for many years, almost 20 years, and then no other deck until I'm not even really sure when. And then the deck that came to me, pardon me, I'm just trying to retrieve my the questions. Where did they go? So I really just started to collect decks or acquire them, and so it's been very, very interesting to be engaged with that, and I apologize that I'm okay, here we go. The questions just disappeared. I'm wondering what that's trying to tell me. Anyway, we're going with it. So my most used decks are, there's going to be a lot of repeat here because I have a limited number that I'm choosing from at this point. So, which is fine because I'm feeling very nourished by the decks. So I would say that be in the honor of being in the present moment. It is the Tarot of the Crone, the Marielle, and also what came actually soon after. Not soon after, but once I started having other decks come into my purview, if you will, the Thoth deck came in. And I was very mixed about it when I first came in contact with it, but I will say that it is a deck and a system that does speak to me. And so I do use this deck quite frequently. And I do use it in conjunction with other decks, even though this is very much its own thing. I take it for what it is, which is quite a lot of rich information, and that definitely is attractive to me and speaks to me. And so I do use this deck quite a bit. So I would say those three. I can't really narrow it to one at this point. What is my least used deck? And I feel like this is me, as the classically trained musician that I am, saying that, or admitting or revealing that Mozart is not my jam. Sorry, Wolfgang. Even though I'm a classically trained singer, even though my voice is quite well suited to his music, but the Rider-Waite. And perhaps in my naivete, I haven't come across the right version of that deck. So I have seen some versions that people have shown on their videos, and I am curious to explore, but that is definitely the least used deck in my possession. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. I hope I won't be excommunicated. How did you learn to read tarot? I learned intuitively. I just naturally started to read the cards and understand the messages from the images when I received the mother piece. And then as I started to understand more about the history of tarot and the Rider-Waite system, and that came into my awareness, I did start to read a bit, study a bit, layer the information where appropriate into some of my readings, and I do use the Rider-Waite. It's just not used very much, but primarily it's intuitive. It's an intuitive practice for me based on my other studies into the psyche through the art of yoga, through the arts of somatic learning, and so on and so forth. Like this, my Ayurvedic studies. So it's a layering process for me. So that is how I learned. Did I skip anything here? No. Number 6, what do you use tarot for? I engage with the cards for myself, for my own life guidance, for a yearly overview, a card that will travel with me for the year, and then usually edifying cards for as the months go on, a card for each month. And then recently been, rather than readings, more a card for the week, and then deepening in and taking notes and sitting with the cards and how they interlock and interplay with one another. And then as I'm doing things like the challenges or things like that, then that all gets to play together. I don't generally do readings per se for myself. It's more working with them energetically and as touchstones or talisman for me to return to and anchor myself to as I'm moving through my daily life. And then I also use them working with clients. as readings or layered into other work that I do the with my private practice, which is in itself has evolved quite dramatically in the last year, and I would say actually really in the last 6 months. It's only in the last 6 months that I've been coming back to some form of work, as we call it. So that's how I'm working with the cards. So how do you read tarot? Intuition, straight up intuition. I'll refer to the books a little bit, the books that come with the decks, but not necessarily books. Maybe a bit for the Thoth system. I will refer to books, but yes, I will say for the Thoth system, I refer to books. That's very elaborate. And I'll refer to the little white books, if you will, when the decks come, especially for something like the Marielle. But by and large, it's mainly intuition and my engagement with the card and the images. Do I use spreads? Mainly not. Although I have been recently developing some spreads for myself, which I do have one up, Ancestral Connections. If anybody's watching, I would be so honored if you might take a look at that and try the spread and see what you think. Even though I'm sitting here saying I don't really use spreads, I've used spreads based on some video responses here, but I don't really use them in my readings with clients or for myself per se. I like to engage with it when it's in this forum. It's been very interesting for me, and that has also led me to develop that one spread, and I'm working on a couple of others. And that those have been inspired by my exploration of my roots and ancestry. Well, that's a whole nother topic. It's not really necessarily about where I came from. I know what that is, but it's more about what it means to be an ancestor. That's my exploration of that. I'll leave that there. But if you check out my Ancestral Connection spread, I would love that. Do you mix tarot with other divination systems? Right now, I really don't. No, I would say no. No, I'll just keep it pretty simple. I don't. I work with the cards. I will mix decks. I will mix tarot with oracle. So if you consider that mixing, but for the most part, I don't. What makes a great tarot deck? It's so subjective. And for me, it's what happens when I'm taking that deck out of the box, how the cards feel, what the images look like. I'm very visual. What is taking me in, and it could be something as like a banquet feast as the Marielle Tarot or the Thoth Tarot, or it could be something as radically lean as the Tarot of the Crone, or I'll leave it at that, Tarot of the Crone. I'm thinking of the Oracle of the Oddities. That's an Oracle deck, or the Anatomy of the Anatomy Tarot. But they're all rich. But it's the images. For me, it is the images and how they speak to me, how they land on my nervous system. And that's why what I work with can change over time, because sometimes I'm needing to be fed in different ways. So there is that. How important to you is it that a deck stick to the tarot system? I think that's complicated because there's so many indie decks now that kind of cross culture, and those tend to be the decks that I work with. I have Rider-Waite. I have some Marseille decks and things of that nature, which are, you know, more in their categories. And so I think when you're reading those decks, there is an honoring of the system, because in a way you're called to. But I still think for me, my intuition trumps all of that. So I think that's the best way I can respond to that question. Do I have any backup decks? No, I do not have any backup decks. And excuse me, what's happening here? I think Two Spirit had something happen to him in the middle as well. I hope that that didn't cut off. I don't have any backup decks, and I am just now feeling like there are 2 or 3 decks that I'm like, I better order another deck to have it as a backup deck. So I currently do not, but I think that could be in the offing, could be necessary. Do you have any unusual or unique decks? And yes, I do. And this is a deck that I've been wanting to mention and share. And I hadn't really kind of found a way to do it. And so here it is. It is the Dream Dust Shamanic Tarot. And this is a deck that was gifted to me by the artist and a good friend of mine, a dear friend of mine who knows the artist somehow. It came to me in the mail last winter, and it can even come to tears now. I was just remembering when I received it. It's so beautiful and completely unusual. The images are they're all painted by Sue Kovacs, the artist, and it's a very personal deck for me. So I will say that I have wondered about trimming the bottom part. I love you, Sue Kovacs. I don't know you. This deck is stunning to me. It moves me so much on so many levels, but I don't love having those words at the bottom. And that's similar to with the Thoth deck. I don't love the way they name the pleasure or debauch or whatever the names. That's distracting to me. So that is the only thing I would say. But this deck is to me illusion. Just really a special deck. So the Dream Dust Shamanic Tarot, Sue Kovacs. I recommend it. I actually think you can get it on Amazon. In fact, the deck that was gifted to me, my mother connected with it as well. And since I go back and forth between my mother's home in New Jersey, where I still am receiving treatment, and then here my home in Brooklyn, I didn't want to take the deck from her, so I actually ordered my own deck for here, for my home here in Brooklyn. So yes, that is an unusual deck. My current deck crush. Well, and this is thanks to Dance of the Soul Tarot Rose, who you seem to have just some of the most wonderful collection of decks, and as well as Kasha over at Wands of Transformation. Between the two of you, I'm like panting and over decks, and luckily for me and my very limited budget, a lot of the decks that you guys present are not available really, but my deck crush is definitely Tarot of the Origins. And uh, I'm not going to give any body parts because I've already had enough surgeries or anything like that. But I would love to have that deck. That deck looks just stunning, right up my alley, right in my wheelhouse, and that would be a wonderful deck to have. Do I read reversals? No, I really don't. I approach the cards as they are in the context in which I'm reading reading it, the context of the reading. With that said, there are times if a card really jumps out at me as a reversal, as actually did happen sometime last week. I think it was the Star came up reversed for me in a challenge I'm doing, and I did take that as a reversal because it so strongly said something to me in that that way. But in general, no, I read in the context of the reading, and when you're reading, everything isn't always, I take it as it comes forward to me, but the reversals don't necessarily speak to me unless they really jump forward at me. Last question, if you could only use one deck, which would it be? I don't know that I can answer that question. I have a feeling, well, it's something that will change over time. Right now, if I could only use one deck, and we're talking tarot decks, I think ultimately it probably would be the Dream Dust Shamanic Tarot. If I really could only sit with one deck, because the deck is very rich, and you almost have to scry into it. So I think that would be the deck that I would choose at this moment. And I'm really happy I got to do this, and I will post the questions and the original video, link to the original video below. And as I continue to say, I'm very happy to be becoming a part of this community, and I hope that some of you will see this. And I'll plug one more time that I have the Ancestral Connections spread and video. It's from a few days ago, and I would just be really honored if some of you might try it and do a response to it, and let me know how you feel about it as a spread. And I will leave it at that until we meet again. Thank you so much for sitting with me, and be well.